Heck yeah.
Hi, Matt Wheeler. What socks do you have for? We got to start with that. What socks do you have for us today?
I'm showing you. These are fun ones. These are
Oh,
flowers. Hold on.
yeah, those
I
are
don't know
so
what
pretty.
are they? Are those carnations? Is that what they're called?
I was thinking peonies, but they could be like I'm really bad at this whole, I can kill anything as you know. So like I'm really bad at all of that, but
I
those look
still
like
have your
peonies. I
I
know
still
I'm
have
gonna come. I
I still have
promise
your
I'm gonna get
pot.
down there. I know.
I saw that
He has
pot.
a pot for me for flowers, not pot like cannabis.
Didn't even think about that. I bought her. We had had this conversation probably about a year ago, and you were telling me that you can't keep anything alive. And like that next, or maybe even the same day, my wife and I had a kind of a mentor teach us before my wife and I got married. He's like, look, sometimes your wife's going to want to go shopping, and she's going to say, I need to buy a red shirt, and you're going to go in and like find all the red shirts, and she's going to try them all on and not pick any of them and be like, yeah, I didn't find what I wanted. And you're going to be like, what the heck, we found all the red shirts, why didn't you buy one? Because she's not shopping, she's shopping. And he's
I
like,
love that.
yeah. And he says, so when she wants to go shopping, you're just going and enjoying, going along for the ride. You're not trying to do anything. And I was like, okay. So one night we ate dinner after you and I had talked about this, and my wife and I were shopping, and I saw this pot that said, this planter that said, please don't die. I think that's what it is. And I bought it for Tammy, and we have yet to meet up. A year later, we have
I'm
yet to.
working on it. I'm going to come and see you both
Well,
down
no,
there.
that's the
That's,
downside is I'm like, Tammy, you've got to travel. I'm not
I
offering to
know.
come too.
No, no,
So
no, no, no. I promise I will. But it's across the valley, which sounds so hard, isn't it? We're probably about an hour away from
I was
each
gonna
other.
say
So,
it's at
but
least an hour. That's a
probably
that's
I'm
a
in the
that's
Northwest and
a
you're in the
trek. Maybe we
Southeast.
should
So I know. But
maybe
like
we
if I just I
we
tried
could
one time and it didn't work out. So like but I need like I'm committing on video that I promise I will reach out and I will come and see you.
well, all right, I get it.
I'm going to do that. And you better have my planter that I will try not to kill something
Well,
in.
I have it tucked away some here.
Oh,
I don't know where it's
there you
at. I got
go. It's all
yeah,
good.
you get your planner.
Okay. So what topic do you have for us today?
Well, it's funny because I have two things on my mind. Last time we talked, we started talking about the Four Horsemen by Gottman,
Mm-hmm.
and we talked about criticism,
Mm-hmm.
and then we didn't go any further. And so I have two things on my mind. The next one we can talk about is contempt, and contempt, like it's an interesting word, but like when you see it in action, it looks like just built-in resentment, right? Like, um, and when I see it, it can look mean, it can look snarky, it can look, well, I mean, honestly, it can look abusive. But contempt is when you are attacking somebody uh with an intent to insult or abuse them, right? And most of the time, I don't even like, to be honest, Gottman's definition there, attacking sense of attacking their self with an intent to insult and abuse. I think a lot of times contempt happens, and it's not even like this conscious intention to try and hurt. It's that I've got so much pain, it comes out sideways, it oozes out, and you do something or say something, and I'm snappy, right? And it is a sign of somebody's hurt and pain. And the best thing we can do as a partner when we see contempt come up is to actually lean into their contempt, not take it personal, and instead lean in with a, hey, you're hurting. Like, tell me more. What's up? Like, try and get them to open up. And they might follow that up with more contempt. Oh, what do you mean, what's
Mm-hmm.
up? Like, you know
Mm-hmm.
what's up. And you just stay there. You're right. I know what's up. I know the hurt and pain I've caused. However, what in particular is coming up right now? Was it something I did or said? Was it just, were you reminded of something? Right? You try to sit in that space of that hurt without taking it personal. That is not easy to do, but it is totally doable. So it has to be practiced. Now that would be my that's my immediate response to contempt is I'm going to try and practice leaning in with like, whoa, what happened? I hurt you. Like I had somebody, I don't know that contempt would be the right way, but a few months back, I was working with a client and I accidentally poked. I mean, I'm always poking, right? Because as a therapist, I'm trying to figure out like, what do we need to get at? And I touched something that I didn't mean to like the reaction because this client out of nowhere is just like F you, Matt, like and I was like, whoa, what just happened? What did I hit? Right? I got curious. And so my natural response at this point to contempt is to try and get curious with the person. But it is a practice, learn skill that I'm going to encourage all of you to do with your partner and other people. However, Gottman actually talks about getting rid of contempt by he calls it building a culture of appreciation. And in order to build a culture of appreciation, I almost say more importantly is build a culture of appreciation in your mind, right? You need to see through the insults or the contempt, the resentment. You need to see through it and realize what are all the positive qualities? What are the gratitude? What is the gratitude that I have for my spouse, for the positive actions that are in our lives, the positive things that they have contributed to me? That is going to be, as far as Gottman's approach, is changing that space in your mind for whether you have contempt or your partner has contempt. You want to build a culture of appreciation. Now, that building a culture of appreciation, I think, is even more important for the person who is feeling contempt,
Mm.
because they have to figure out how do I uproot all this resentment and start to get to, okay, you know what? What are the good things that my partner does contribute? It takes a lot of work and it's slow. That's the other thing I try and tell people. Like any of this change is slow. It just takes practice and takes a while. And so that would be, I mean, I have a whole nother topic I can bring up that I have been having fun with lately.
Well, I have a couple questions about
Well, no,
this
that's what
before
I
you.
was saying. We
Yeah,
might
yeah,
just
yeah.
sit
Please.
here
Yeah,
and
yeah. So no, I
and
think you'll be able to. But like when you're talking about, like the person with the resentment, like to me, this feels like it, like it would be very difficult to do very early in the process, especially like when all of this stuff is really fresh. So
terribly difficult.
where do you see um where do you see this kind of being able to be more addressed? Because it feels like you have to be able to get grounded a bit, before you can, or do you disagree?
Well, there's some disagreement. I think it's way
Okay.
easier. It's I think you are correct. It is way easier to work through our contempt later on in recovery, right? Like
Okay. Sure. Okay.
I would totally agree. It's way easier. But for my own inner peace, early on,
No.
I'm going to be trying to recognize the gratitude I have. Here's the problem with developing gratitude early on. We have this thing, and I'd be, if you guys think I'm wrong, like I'd totally love to hear your thoughts, but we have this weird association with forgiveness that we think when if we are to forgive somebody, that means we need to trust them. And so I hear a lot of people saying, I'm not going to have gratitude. I'm not going to forgive. I'm not going to um, learn to appreciate my partner. They've hurt me incredibly. And I'm like, I don't disagree. I don't want you to trust them right now. Like, I won't say that to them out loud because they need to figure out what that looks like. But like in my mind, I'm like, I don't want you to trust them right now. What have they done to show that they're trustworthy? Right. But forgiveness, gratitude, right? You can have those things without trusting somebody. You can have that, but it does require working probably on a forgiveness trajectory. But don't confuse, like, if you forgive somebody, I've forgiven plenty of people I would never trust again in my life. Like,
Yes, and I think like for me, the learned concept for forgiveness was somebody early in my recovery said this, and this really made me upset. Was you're letting them live rent free in your head, and I was like, yeah, yes, and that I was like, what? I'm allowing this? I was like, no, you don't understand. Righteous indignation and all that kind of stuff. And at some point, I was like, these people, A, don't care, B, don't know, or three, B, C would be thrilled if I was in turmoil. Some of them really were vengeful and would be thrilled. So I am permitting all of this stuff to happen to me, regardless of what's happening to them. So learning that I forgive for myself, like I don't have to forget, I don't have to you trust, I don't have to do any of that, but I just don't have to let them have the energy. I don't have to let that negative energy permeate me. So I do it for myself, on lots of levels. And it's challenging, but the payoff for me, regardless of them, there's still a bunch of them, that I never want to be in, connection with ever again.
right.
But like, I'm not holding on to that toxic stuff for me.
Yeah, no, it's learning how to let go and learning how to forgive and learning. I love that phrase, living rent free in their head. I mean, I still have people that live rent free in my head that I'm like, I'm working on it. It's a tough journey to learn to get that stuff out. Um, but yeah, that forgiveness, letting go piece, really difficult, especially if we've been hurt.
Yes. So we have a question, and we'll answer this. I haven't read it, so I don't know if it applies to this. But then, if we have time, if we have more questions, great. And otherwise, we'll turn to the other topic. So, 5 months since discovery, I'm the betrayed partner. He immediately agreed to start 12-step meetings and has been going to SAA 3 times a week since August and seeing a CSAT weekly too. He says he doesn't struggle with resisting temptation to act out now. I have a hard time believing this because he is 50 years old and this seems to have been a lifelong coping mechanism. And he's been acting out for our entire 8-year relationship. Suddenly he gets caught and can stop easily. Is that possible?
Such a good question. It's interesting how often this question has come up with even just a whole set of my clients. And this is where um, there's a lot of nuances. Um, but let me put it this way. Yes, it's possible. But in fact, I had a client the other day who said, but doesn't every addict say that? And I laughed because I said, sure, I've had plenty of them say that. Like, no, it's not a problem anymore. And so it's hard because, yes, it's possible, but I've also heard plenty say it because they're trying to calm their spouse down when I wish they would just be honest, right? And so it's really difficult because the best you can do is probably just say, well, I find that hard to believe, but if that's what you're saying, then I'm gonna try and believe you. um, I think, let me give a couple of scenarios. Sometimes, um, one of the times, and I don't have any data to support this other than just my history of working with clients over all the years. So, like, I don't know of any research. I just know the anecdotal experience that I have. So, I'm trying to give that caveat before I jump in here. But I have seen clients that like lose temptation as soon as discovery happens are often clients who have what I would refer to as like a traumatic disclosure. And so
Mm,
let me give you some like more depth to that. So like let's say there's a client who the disclosure happens because of an arrest. And the arrest doesn't even need to be like because of sexual like issues. It can be anything. They were arrested and in the midst of getting arrested for whatever it is, all their secrets come out, right? I've seen that happen, and for whatever reason, in the process of that whole experience, when you have something traumatic happen, I've seen it to where they'll say, I don't know what the deal is, but ever since that happened, I don't have any temptation around this thing. Um, and so is that guaranteed? Of course not. Like, I don't know why that happens, but I've seen enough of it to know there is something there. I'd be super interested to have somebody do some research on it because I've seen that. Now, obviously, traumatic disclosures, and I'm not talking traumatic for the partner, I'm talking traumatic for the person who was acting out sexually. Uh, um, so, but uh, because obviously, usually disclosure is traumatic for a partner, no matter what. Um, but where I was going, there's also the possibility, and I'm not trying to embolden your individual here. Your partner needs to see a CSAT and figure this out, but there are times where somebody has been acting out or being sexually compulsive, they're having some unwanted behavior, and there's times where I've found that despite the spouse saying they're an addict, I've been able to say, look, you've got some unhealthy behavior. I'm not sure that you're at addiction level. I'm trying to think of, oh gosh, I can't remember the guy's name. I think his first name is Josh, but he did a bunch of research around pornography and like religion. And I listened to him speak at the SASH conference a couple years ago, and he basically said that within religious communities, sexual addiction is overdiagnosed, and within secular communities, it's underdiagnosed. And
I
people,
would believe that.
yeah.
Anecdotally, I would agree. Yeah.
And so that's what his research showed. And so there are so many times where I have, somebody come in, they come in from a high demand religion, and they've literally said to me, I'm a sex addict. And I'm like, okay, well, that's interesting. Let's explore that. And they tell me their story. I have them do a SAST. And by the end of the session, I'm saying, look, I'm not sure you're an addict. And they're in tears. No, I have to go home and tell my wife that I'm an addict. Otherwise, she's going to leave me. And the truth is, she's just hurt and upset. And so there are times where I've worked with people where there's a lot of temptation that goes away just because they were unhealthy, but they weren't maybe at addict level. And so just the exposure helps them realize, like, I can't live this way. So you could imagine like somebody who's not an alcoholic, let's say, but they're driving drunk, and they get pulled over and get arrested, and they're like, "This is crap. I don't ever want. I've gotten into enough trouble drinking. I don't want to do this anymore." And they're like, "I'm not even tempted." Like, because even though they weren't an alcoholic, they were abusing the behavior. So that's another situation where somebody might not have temptation. I just have to be careful in sharing this because anybody could listen and be like, see, I'm not an addict. And I'm like,
Right,
slow down,
right, right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
slow down and get
But
proper
she says
diagnosis.
it seems to have been a lifelong coping mechanism, and so one of the things I wondered about is, and yeah, I mean I've had that too. So a couple things. The pink cloud is I think is really real. That's my experience is, oh, I'm starting to feel better. I've been honest and like things are better.
Yeah.
And so as long as we keep doing the work, things we can get into recovery. He is seeing a CSAT. He's going to S group meetings. Hopefully he's working the steps, not just warming a seat. But the other thing I wondered about, because I see this a lot too, we at our residential treatment program, we're looking holistically across all behaviors, because it's like, okay, I stopped, sex and porn, but you know, I've gained, 40 pounds since August because I'm eating, or I'm smoking or vaping, or I'm gaming, I'm shopping, rather than shopping. So, but it's one of those things where looking across, all things, could he in this moment, not struggle with the temptation? Yeah. And as long as he doesn't, I say, rest on his laurels and
Right.
decide, oh yeah, I'm cured. If he continues to do the work, You know, there are addicts that are always tempted. I mean, Dr. Bob struggled for a long time early in his recovery. He was one of the founders of AA, and he struggled with the desire to drink, you know.
Yeah.
And then there's like I am fortunate that really was removed from me, but I'll tell you what, even after all these decades, there are times if my husband and I, you know, are out and I'll say, please don't have this certain kind. I was like, I don't need the mental headspace. Like, I don't want to smell it. I don't want to see it, you
Yeah.
know? And he always is honoring of that. You know, he may not even have anything alcoholic, you know. So it really is, as long as we're aware, yes, in this moment, he may not be tempted. As long as he doesn't go, oh yeah, that's been completely removed from me, and is doing the work, you know, he could be on a very good trajectory as long as he continues to address those underlying issues. So,
Yeah, there's a couple of key things that you're really pointing out. If it's like a post discovery euphoria, like she called it the pink cloud, right? Like there are times where it's like, oh my gosh, I feel amazing, and I don't think I'm ever gonna have an issue again. Like that makes me nervous when people talk about that. I'd rather they say this feels amazing that I have no temptations, and you know what? I've got to keep doing my work because hopefully I never have any temptations again. But man, I gotta figure out how to live healthy because I haven't known how to do that for so long, right? If they're like, no, I have no temptation, so I don't need to learn and grow and develop new coping mechanisms. I'm like, whoa, it doesn't matter whether you're an addict or not. You're not healthy, right? Figure out if this has been a lifelong coping mechanism, he needs to figure out how to get healthy in his life and develop coping mechanisms where he can shift that. And so there is, I almost want to say sometimes we're too concerned about whether somebody has temptations or not. It's really whether they have temptations or not. Let's hope they don't, if we're being honest. But whether they do or not, they need to learn how to be a healthy human. And so if they don't have temptation, that's no excuse for like not getting healthy, right? So don't, if you suddenly gain this idea of like, well, maybe he's not an addict, it doesn't matter, except that treatment might be a little different, right? You might handle treatment a little differently if it's an addiction versus just an unhealthy coping mechanism. But overall, the changes need to occur in a person's life to be healthy for probably both of you.
well, yeah, because you 5 months ago you had discovery. How painful for you, you know?
Totally.
And so regardless of, you know, like at the end of the day, you know, and I say this all the time to partners, it's like healthy boundaries for you. I mentioned at the top of this that, you know, one of Matt's and my colleagues, but he works directly with her, you know, Debbie McRae, who does the alternating Fridays with us. You know, we were at a betrayed partner retreat and we talked extensively about healthy boundaries, you know, for the partners, regardless of what the addict does or doesn't do, regardless of if they get into healing or not, how fast their journey is, and all of that. You know, the internal boundaries and external boundaries. Like the whole retreat was amazing and, you know, healing, but like it's so important, you know, to remember that regardless of what he's doing, what are you doing to take care of you? So great, he's doing that, and we hope he continues. But you taking care of you is what you really can focus on. So, oh, here's a good one. What this is, we hear this all the time. When your spouse does not want to do therapy, is there any definition of doing work that does not involve therapy?
Yeah, I love this question. I'm going to start out, and this may sound unpopular in this circle, and that is, um, I don't think therapy is the answer to everything. I had a really insightful conversation with somebody who used to be uh, a bit of a mentor to me, and we were talking about like the gun crisis, or rather the school shooting crisis in America that continues to go on. And I had talked about, man, we need, mental health. We really need to step up, or something more needs to happen there. And the insight he had at the time was, I think we give mental health too much credit. Like there's probably way more that needs to happen that's outside the hands of mental health. And I mean, the conversation didn't even get political, but it was like this idea that this is so multifaceted that mental health is just one small part that might be able to help change here. And so I'm going to say this with a pretty big caveat, that there is a lot that doesn't involve traditional therapy that somebody can do, right? Like people have transformations all the time, becoming healthier, better people, whether they find a route through religion or some other way. I mean, whether you're reading self-help books, here's what I will say: doing the work is changing attitudes, beliefs, behaviors so that we become a new person. And do I believe therapy is a wonderful way to do that? Yes. Do I believe, my guess is it's probably the most researched and like probably, I'll go out on a limb here and say the most researched or a reputable way to do that? Sure. Like I would be my guess. But at the same time, I mean, therapy as a practice has only been around what, 150 years? I mean, therapy is a baby compared to the history of humanity. And so what is it? What is the work? The work is changing attitudes, beliefs, behaviors, the way we treat other people, relationships. Can we do that without traditional therapy? Sure. But then my question is, well, then tell me what that looks like for you. How have you been able to change and become a better person, a different person, a new person? Right? I want to see that. And how do I take a hold of that? So, but I can see when your spouse kind of says that, and then I'm sitting there going, okay, so then what are you doing? Well, not that. Okay, that doesn't work. Like, show me, teach me, help me understand it. Because if your attitudes, your beliefs about yourself, about others, if your behavior isn't changing, you ain't doing nothing. Like, except using new vocabulary. And that doesn't work. So I'd be really curious, Tammy, what comes up as you hear me walk through that?
Well, I put in the chat. So 12-step programs. So I get all, first of all, even if you see a brilliant therapist that's really qualified to work with these things, that's 50 minutes once a week. That's not enough to combat an addiction, a brain, thinking disease that is 24/7. So then like I always say, okay, see a qualified therapist. And so if you're taking the qualified therapist out, I get this all the time too. Well, I'm listening to podcasts and I'm like, well,
Yeah.
that there's no, I mean, yay. And,
Well,
there's no accountability with that.
but
There's no,
somebody might find that they get a ton of healing out of listening to a podcast, but then I'm going to ask them, right? Tell me how listening to that podcast is helping you, and how's it changing the way you think? How's it changing the way you behave? How's it changing the way
yes.
you treat other people? Like,
And
so
how you're accountable. That's the
yeah,
big thing, is like, who are you accountable to if you're just listening or reading a book? That's my big thing is, and there are all kinds of research that, addicts change and we need a community.
yeah,
Like I've been doing this a long time. I don't know anybody who actually they may be abstinent. They may not be acting out. That is not recovery. So,
right.
but they can
Don't heal
probably
in
do that
isolation.
reading a book. Right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
you
That's
you
exactly
don't
right.
you don't heal in isolation. We need a community. And so that's why I think for thousands of years, right? There's been religious groups and people trying to connect together to better themselves. Okay, so then where are you getting that? And that's one reason why 12 steps are so powerful. I've had people who they've asked me, well, okay, so I'm not an addict. Should I go to 12 step? And I said, if you don't have community anywhere else, 12 steps amazing. And you can go in there and say, hey, I've struggled with sexually compulsive behavior and it's damaged my relationships and it's damaged myself. And I'm looking for connection and learning to overcome. And some people are like, well, I just don't like saying I'm an addict. Okay, well then go in there and don't say I'm an addict. Say I've struggled with compulsive behavior or whatever. Say whatever you want, but just be honest about it. Tell everybody in there. I'm not sure I'm willing to admit or to say I'm an addict, but I am willing to admit that my behavior has really hurt a lot of people. Right? Good. Go do that. So there, but yeah, there are 12 steps phenomenal for gaining a sense of community. I highly recommend it.
So there's a book that my colleague Scott Brassard and Kristen Snowden, who does webinars, wrote called Life Anonymous. It's a great book of like how you can implement that even if you're not an addict. You know, I've been in lots of 12-step meetings where someone says, "I'm here to learn more." Like the
Hmm.
you're like I'm not saying I'm an addict. I'm not identifying as that yet, but I want to hear. And sometimes, you know, for them, they start hearing stories of other people and go, "Wow, I can relate to that. I can relate to the pain of that." This is not like we just tell our acting out behaviors. That is not what a 12-step meeting is. I know some partners have fear that, oh, you know, my addict's going to go learn more, you know, bad behaviors. No, that's not the point. It's how we learn to live in the world when we've used problematic behaviors as a coping mechanism. How do we stop doing that without switching to another one and learn to show up, take accountability and responsibility seriously? So, okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, so that's the end of the question. So you want to do part two of your other topic that's been coming up for you in the office lately?
Yes, but if anybody has any questions, throw them out there.
Yes, throw them
Because
in. Yeah.
obviously we love questions. I actually just posted an Instagram video, which is probably like a minute and 20 seconds. I did it on this topic. And I don't know, maybe you and I've already beat this to death, but I feel like no matter what, it's probably helpful to talk about again. And and a shameless plug, my Instagram is the shoeless therapist. So I always like new followers.
You
Um,
should be the sock full therapist instead of the shoe less. You should be the sock full because
yeah,
you're really sock oriented.
yeah. I'm filled with socks, and
Yes.
I've got lots of socks. I was telling my wife I probably need a different drawer because my drawer is
There would be
actually.
no cleaning out the drawer or winnowing them down. I just need another drawer. I can totally
Yeah,
understand
no,
that.
I'm probably a total sock hoarder at this point. So if we're being honest, I've been meaning to do an Instagram video with my dog Millie,
Oh,
because Millie, she is a golden doodle, and we learned early on that she loves to eat socks.
eat
And
them?
no, for real, eat them. It's
Oh
dangerous,
yeah.
actually.
Yeah, it is really dangerous. Yeah.
And oh no, we paid for a very expensive surgery. And so we have her sectioned off to so that she can't go walk around the house and find socks because we're not good enough to put them all away all the time. And but I have a whole set of socks because one of my sons would wear my socks all the time. And I have a whole, and he would leave them out for the dog. And I have a whole set of socks that I've never shown on video because I only have one of them. And so I need to probably start bringing them and just showing them off on here. But I'm going to do a video and introduce everybody to my sock eating dog. But anyway, so the topic that's been coming up on my brain, and I did, like I said, on my Instagram, I talk a little bit more about it, but is is impact versus intentions. And I don't know, maybe you and I have beat this to death already, but if there's it's one thing I want to encourage everybody to do when you feel yourself getting defensive, your partner comes to you and says something and they're upset, our instinct, every single one of us, is to explain ourselves. Oh, well, let me tell you what I was feeling. Let me tell you what I was thinking. Let me tell you why I wasn't hurting. And now, if I were to apply this to like recovery work, I have heard, you have heard it all out there, by the way, not just me, but I've heard it all. Well, when I when I had sex with a sex worker, I was thinking about you. Or when I was looking at porn, I was thinking about you. And it's like,
Really
okay,
not helpful. Yeah.
no, not even
Yeah.
in the slightest bit
Yeah. Yeah.
helpful. It's like, I was thinking about how I wish we had a better relationship. And it's like, oh, okay.
No, not
And
helpful.
no, or I didn't tell you because I didn't want to hurt your feelings. And so I lied to you because I didn't want to hurt you. And so don't you know how much I love you? And although there is some truth to all of that chaos, we are explaining our intentions. And it's similar to hitting somebody over the head with a baseball bat and then saying, "Oh my gosh, I can tell you're bleeding. You might have a concussion, but I know what's going to help you best. Let me explain why I didn't mean to hit you over the head, and you'll feel better." And it's like, and I don't mean to be rude, but I love in a way kind of like waking us up a little bit. And so think about this. It's like, no, dummy. If you hit somebody over the head with a baseball bat and they're bleeding and probably have a concussion, you take them to the emergency room or to urgent care or call 911, right? How do we address the wound? You want to focus on the impact first and foremost. And the only time you ever explain your intentions is when the person says, when they've recovered well enough to when they say, "Hey, what happened? Why did you hit me over the head with a baseball bat? What was going on for you?" And whether their explanation is, "Man, I felt so crazy. I was outside swinging the bat, running around, closing my eyes. And I know it's stupid, but like it just felt so much better to be swinging a bat." Or, "I was swinging towards the tree and you came out of nowhere and it flew out of my hands and hit you in the head." Only when the person asks you, "What were you thinking?" is it ever okay to share your intention, right? If they aren't asking what was going on for you intentionally, shut your mouth and keep it closed and ask them, "How are you feeling? What can I do for you? What's going on? Tell me where it hurts." So, Tammy, too strong?
No, no, no. So your friend Troy and I did a role play. I said we're going for SAG Awards uh on Wednesday, and we it was the defensiveness, like role playing about defensiveness of like, I caught you doing something and you're immediately, telling me like why you didn't really do that or like whatever, and so yeah, the defensiveness and like all of those reasons and excuses. Well, I was thinking of you. I mean, like you're just digging a hole that's even deeper, and more painful. So yeah, I agree. Shut your mouth if you are asked. But even if you're asked why you did it, I mean, there are a lot of addicts that
Well,
that can't even identify it. Then
oh, totally. And I would argue if somebody asks me why, the first thing you're going to hear me say is, "Well, I can tell you why, but it's probably not going to make you feel any better." Right? Like I'm going to
Mhm.
validate them that I will tell you what my intentions are, but my intentions do not negate your feelings. I'll tell you
Right,
what I was thinking, but it doesn't, I need you to know that it doesn't matter what I was thinking. I still hurt you. And
right.
and that is the most validating thing you can say to somebody who's been hurt. Like, "I see your pain, and regardless of what I meant to do, you're still in pain." So,
So there's a question while you're talking about validating, and it says, "What does it look like to validate someone without agreeing with them? What kind of phrases can be used?" That's
yeah,
a very good question. So,
it is. It's actually a wonderful question that this is, I would almost say that this one is an art form. Um, I think when you don't agree with somebody, you actually have to try and you've got to figure out, do you understand them? So that's going to be probably the number one thing I'm going to do. If somebody's sharing something with me, and I'm trying to think of an example because I swear I have plenty, but somebody will share something with me, and my instinct might be to be like, I want to argue against that. I just think I don't see their perspective, and I think they're wrong, right? Which
I'll
isn't
give you
true.
one. Matt, you always leave your socks out. You always leave your socks out, you know? And I
Yeah.
know that that's not always true. So, you
Well,
know,
and so uh my first instinct, especially when I don't agree with somebody, is going to lean into that to basically say, "You know what? Tell me more about that, Tammy. Like, tell me why it feels like I always leave them out. What are you trying to tell me?
I see your socks everywhere. I'm worried about Millie. Yeah, you're demonstrating to our children that this is that you can leave all the socks out. This is what you're modeling as a father. How's that?
Okay, so if I'm hearing you, what you're really telling me is that you're worried about our sweet Millie, as much of a butthead of a dog as she is sometimes. You're worried about our sweet Millie, and you know what? I really care about Millie too, and so I can hear why me leaving my socks out, which I do at times, um, is really scary for you. But if I'm understanding it, you're also really nervous about what kind of example I'm setting for the kids. Why?
Yes,
Tell me more about why that worries you so much.
because if you show that it's okay to our kids, they're going to think it's okay too.
Ah, and so that makes me wonder if like you you feel like you're trying to teach them that it's not okay. You're trying to teach them responsibility, and so then when I don't do it, it feels like I'm actually undermining you.
Yes,
And
undermining is the exact word that came to me. Yes.
ah, oh, okay, all right. I think I'm understanding better why that is so bothersome. Um, is there anything else about the situation that I'm maybe not understanding that you're sharing with me?
We could probably, I mean, I could go off into different directions, but no,
Right.
but I think that that's a good example. So,
Right.
like it
And
started out
so
about the socks and it wasn't about the socks.
right. And so what I'm doing, if you can hear me, I may not agree with her. I don't always leave them out. I can fight
Right.
over her use of the word always.
Exactly.
Instead, I'm going to want to just understand, whoa, this is obviously bothering you. I care more that it's bothering you than I do um, about whatever the issue is. And so, what I'm going to try and do is pull out from the other person as much nuance as I can. Then I'm going to then try and validate, which is interesting because if you notice, I haven't totally validated her yet, right? If I'm going to
But
validate,
I felt heard. I felt
no,
like you got to the exact, I was like, yes, he's undermining me as a
he's
parent.
undermining
He's
me.
undermining our parenting for our children.
Yes.
It's going to be a disaster. I mean, like all of those, hyper, over the top things. But yeah, it was like absolutely undermining was the word that came to mind.
Yeah. And so when we go into validate, I think more than anything, that first step is really help making sure I understand. But if I'm trying to understand properly, I'm not telling her, oh, I understand. What I'm doing is as I understand, she's feeling heard. She knows I understand because I'm pulling enough out to where she's like, oh my gosh, that's it. That's exactly it.
Hmm.
Now, the validation would probably be the next step. And I might say to her, honestly, I can't remember the last time I left my socks out, right? Like, I'm so careful about that because I care about Millie and I'm worried about it that I've actually developed. Literally, last night, I'm sitting on the couch uh, and I wanted to take my socks off, but I'm in Millie's room. Because it's the big family room. And I'm like, oh, I don't want to take my socks off. So I said, you know what? I can take them off and put them in my pajama pockets. And so I
Hmm.
did. I took them off, put them in both my pockets. I felt in, made sure I had them both. And that way I knew that when I head back to the bedroom, I can pull them out of my pockets and put them in the dirty clothes. And so there's a part of me that's like, man, I've developed a system here, and yet she's still frustrated. And so I'm like, okay, so if I'm going to move into validation, I'm going to be like, you know what? I can see where my behavior has invalidated you or no, undermined you. And I can see that this really is about your concern for Millie and it's about a concern for us being on the same page and raising our children. Um, and and so I don't want you to feel that way, right? Because that's a terrible feeling to have, and you feel like you're up against me and my behavior, and you're wondering if the kids are going to do similar things or not respect you, and that's got to feel terrible, right? And so what I'm doing in the validation process is trying to narrow in on what are the issues that are impacting her, and just like I said earlier, focus on the impact, not the intention. I'm really just trying to get in and see, let her know that I can see from her perspective why she feels the way she does. And again, I don't have to agree with her at all. So hopefully that gives you, that's a
It
really good.
does. Yeah, and you know what? If you had said, I understand, like immediately would have closed everything off because you don't understand, because
No,
I'm talking about the socks, but I'm not really talking about the socks. So it would have shut down everything and it would all, it could have almost flipped it over to you of like, I understand and did it, whatever you would have,
it,
trailed off on.
I'll tell you what's validating. If I say I want to understand, that's
Yes.
actually validating.
Yes.
I don't understand is also validating. And
Hmm.
think about that for a second, because she's in that moment going, "You're right, you don't understand."
Hmm.
Right.
Hmm.
And so you're joining with her to and saying, but I want to. So let
And
me
tell
ask
me
you,
more. I'm
tell me
curious about
more.
that. Yes,
Mhm.
all of those things. Because, and the other thing that does is rather than me going into defensive mode of like, I've got to defend myself, it's like I'm leaning in because I really want to understand. So now I'm engaged and my thinking part of my brain is actually engaged rather than that, I got to get out of here. I got to shut this all down. So it shifts everything, if you're able just to hold the space and go, I don't understand, but I want to. Okay, so, but I do think it's an art form. But like I've had partner, I was or no, addicts. I was talking to addicts a few weeks ago, and one of them said, I told her, the addict to the partner, you've got to understand. And I was like, no, no, she does not. Like you can have the conversation, but the like one of the another really bad thing to say, tell a partner you have to understand me. No, 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 they don't. No. So
You could say, I find myself longing to feel
yes,
understood. And when I
yes,
don't feel understood, I just want to pull away from you. Right.
yes.
But now I'm
There's lots
taking
of ways. Yeah,
ownership for all
yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah. But coming in defensive, if I've got to, you've got to understand. My whole no, no. Rather than going like, gosh, I understand as an addict. I understand that my past behaviors have been hurtful, and I really want to understand where you're coming from. I see that you're hurt right now, whatever it is, like really different. And again, you're not saying, oh, I agree with you, whatever you're blaming me for, but you're leaning into the situation, and giving space, so that there can be conversation. What a concept! Because like in addiction, we're like, no, 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 that's difficult. I don't want to. No, I've got to go over here. So okay. Next question. Spouse is done talking about the betrayal subject 5 months after latest discovery and gets defensive and upset and says, all betrayed spouses want to do is talk. If betrayed partner feels they need to talk in order to feel physically close, and spouse says they feel attacked and need to feel physically close to talk, how do we move forward? But that's a catch, isn't it?
Oh, it's such a catch.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this is a um I think there's two directions you can go with this. One,
Okay.
they come to the top of my mind, and one for each person, actually.
Okay.
Um, and it's really the same. If we slow down enough to say, help me understand why you don't want to talk about this anymore. So let's not talk about any of the details about the betrayal subject. Help me understand why you get defensive, why you get upset. What about the subject is so distressing for you? Right? So that's talking to the person who's tired of talking about betrayal. I might want to try and find that out. To the person who continually needs to talk about the betrayal, it's almost the same question. What is it about the subject that you feel you need to keep talking about it for? Like, what feels unresolved? Like, what part of us continuing to talk about it do you think is going to, what's it going to change for you? Right? Like, to me, I feel like we've talked about this over and over. And I just want to understand, like, what part do you think is going to get resolved by us continuing to talk about it? It would require empathy on both parts to be able to have that conversation, though, right? I can tell you empathetically why both people are stuck where they are, but a lot of times, in order to get out of a stuck place, something that feels like an impasse, we actually need to talk about that stuck place. Okay, so we're both stuck here. You want to go one direction. I want to go to the other. You want to not talk about it at all. I want to talk about it incessantly, or what feels like incessantly to you anyway. Um, let's talk about why we're there. And a lot of times it's because when we have talked about it, I feel like you've dismissed it every time. And so I do want to keep talking about it because no matter when we talk about it, I feel dismissed every single time. And I'm like, that makes sense. You're wanting validation from the person who did the betraying. And so you keep talking about it because you're hoping they'll show up. And the other, I mean, that might be, but then what they hear is that you're just criticizing them every time you bring it up. Let's bring up my faults. Let's bring up all the bad things I've done. And their shame overpowers them. And so they shut down and they finally are fed up. Every time you talk about this, it's all about just dragging me out, emotionally beating me up, talking about all the stupid things I've done. I've had it. I'm not going to put up with this anymore. And really we probably have to slow down and figure out why each of us are in the space we're in without actually pulling out all the details. So for instance, if I'm the betrayed spouse in this situation, I might say, hey, can we talk about why you don't want to talk about it? Well, something will be brought up and you're going to want to be defensive and be like, well, yeah, because every time of this and you never blah, blah, blah. And it's like, whoa, if you're going to talk about it, you have to stay at the level you introduced to say, okay, well, I do have a counter argument that's coming up for me, but I don't want to say it because I'm just glad you shared with me what you did. It's all about learning to slow down and trying to figure out why we're in that stuck place. When it's been bad enough for couples, I've even said to couples, look, we need a rule that you can only bring this up in couples counseling with the help of your couples therapist. And I'm willing to go there and talk with you guys about it, but it causes so much of a disaster for both of you. That's the rule we have for right now. And I've done that. And I mean, and when I say that, I'll ask them, do you both agree? Does that feel
Mm-hmm.
right for you guys? Right? Because I'm not going to give them a rule that they have to live by. I just throw it out as a suggestion. But there are times where, like I've had situations where the topic can be so heated. I've said once we do a formal disclosure, a therapeutic disclosure, we're only going to talk about it in therapy session. Like if you have another question about disclosure or whatever, we're only doing it in a therapy session because you guys need to figure out how to have like reasonably um I'm trying to think of the word, reasonably stable lives outside of here. And if you just keep bringing up the same miserable subjects every time, life's too chaotic. So let's just try and bring that up for a therapy session. So what comes to your mind, Tammy?
Well, yeah, I was thinking the same thing. It's like, having scheduled conversations. I agree that you guys feel like you're at an impasse. And so making sure you're working with a qualified therapist to do this. But we often talk about action. And I was thinking it's really action on both sides. What is he doing to show you he's trustworthy? Dr. Rob says all the time, why would you want to have sex or feel close to somebody who isn't trustworthy? It's only been 5 months. And for betrayed partners, that's a very short amount of time. He's known all along that he was acting out and he was betraying you and all of those stuff. And you said since the latest discovery, so this is like a pattern. There's been others from what I'm reading. And so, like,
Right.
why would you have any reason to believe that there isn't going to be another discovery down the road unless he's doing the work that he needs to do that shows you that he is different? But yeah, I mean, addicts use physical closeness to push, oh, I feel close to you. I don't feel abandoned. I don't have to feel the shame right now. So we're close, we're good, and that isn't true too. But for partners, I was just talking to Debbie Allen and I told her I have shared your webinar so many times that it is the three circle for betrayed partners. Because if the betrayed partner, if the entire focus of their lives is on the addict and their behaviors, that's a really small world. And so yeah, just like Matt said, finding what is really your life, post discovery, and how do you each, regardless of what either of you is doing, move on. I do think it's important for partners to talk about it. And guess what? We have safe spaces. Our drop-in groups for betrayed partners, great places to talk about that stuff. The betrayed partner online work group starts again on the 19th of February. That's another great place. And for the addict, if he hasn't done like sex addiction 101 or porn addiction 101 online work group, to get that foundational component. If all he has done is stop the problematic behavior, like what I read is kind of the dry drunk, an alcoholic that just stops drinking is abstinent, but it's like they're not very nice people. And so learning to, because it's all the shame and everything else, and I don't have my little coping mechanisms that took me away from all of that, so learning to do things differently. I often use, and I was thinking this too, the negative two step. If you're doing a country dance and then you're doing the two step, he does this, you do this, he does this, you do this, you do this, he does this. I mean, it's the same dance. And unless one of you, like Matt said, slow it down, and one of you stops and goes, I'm curious, can we do this differently? This is exhausting. And,
Yeah.
And it's negative focus. How do we have joy in our lives, regardless of, we're not going to get magically there, but you can be taking steps, that will start to shift things. So, but one of you has to start, so that was my thought on that.
I love it.
I think we're out of time.
We are.
So thank you for the questions. Thanks for joining today. And thanks for the topics. Those are great. And I want to see, I don't really go on Instagram, but I'm probably going to go on Instagram and go see Millie. But you don't have Millie up yet.
Well, I actually have one of my very first videos on Instagram. I have Millie in it actually.
Okay.
But I haven't like formally introduced her as my sock eater.
Okay. Well, I will stay tuned for that. So, but anyway, thank you all. See, next week is the first week of the month, and so Debbie McCrae will be with us. Her stuff is like at the betrayed partner, like even the facilitators were like, wow. So join us for that, and if you're a betrayed partner, consider joining the Empowered Women's Retreat in March in Texas. I'm really looking for it. I'm tired and it's Friday, but I've been busy this week. But I'll tell you what, amazing and healing, and if you're ready to step into that space, the facilitators have got you. So anyway, thanks, Matt. See you in a few
Awesome.
weeks.
Yeah.
Bye.